In addition to metabolic wastes, there are environmental toxins. I don't have to get into that here, but you all know that we live in a sea of toxins, right? From the carpeting to exhaust and everything in between. Now we have electromagnetic poisons. So, what is poison? Well, what is food? Food is something that can be assimilated by the body, by whatever species, whatever organism has ingested it. It's something that can be used for nourishment. It can be used to build new tissue. Poison is that which cannot be used and must be expelled on a very subtle level. And these poisons are can be mild to severe, as you well know. Okay, so the accumulation of one other thing with food, consuming something that you can use, would we consider oxygen a food? Would we consider water a food? Plants. Yeah. Okay. Now, one quick idea I want to just put in here because it's appropriate, and that is everything that we need in the amount that we need, and we don't need any more. Okay, we need oxygen anywhere from 20 to 30% of the atmosphere. Okay, if you put 100% oxygen mask on your mouth and your nose, within 2 weeks you would have emphysema. You know, water is very important. You drink 5-6 gallons a day and you won't live very long. Okay, just keep that in mind. Of course, food is the same, or it's things that we ingest, and chew, and swallow. Okay, so the accumulation of toxins, whether they're from the environment or metabolic waste products, they start to accumulate and then they spill into the blood. The suffix of the word that is used to describe anything in the blood is emia. So if you have very low blood, it's anemia. Okay? If you have too much blood, it's hyperemia. Well, if you get toxins in the blood, it's called toxemia. And that's where the word comes from. Toxemia. Spillage of toxins into the blood. And so what we call disease is our body's effort to get rid of this. Okay, and so now those efforts, depending on how much toxins are being brought in and accumulating and all that, and what organ is working the hardest, and which organ starts to malfunction, we'll call it a disease. It's as if if you look at it as a trunk, the trunk of a tree is the toxemia, and all the branches are the manifestations, and that goes from headache to cancer. Okay. Now, Tilden also, in his back in the early 20th century and the late 19th century, talked about symptoms. Symptoms are usually called diagnoses. My diagnosis is you have a headache. All right. Well, doesn't mean anything. Let's figure out what are we talking about with headache? Is it due to pressure? Is it due to arterial spasm, as in migraines and dilatation? What's it due to? So let's say we find out it's due to pressure. Is pressure the disease? Well, what's causing the pressure? And if you keep going, now let's say eventually it hemorrhages. Is hemorrhage the disease? Well, let's say you die. Is death the disease? You understand that the more you keep trying to figure out what it is behind it, you'll get down to only one thing. It's called toxemia. As John Tilden says, when the cause of the pain is found, it too will be found to be a symptom and not a disease. And this will be true to the end. Okay. All the medical literature, from the Journal of the American Medical Association, the New England Journal of Medicine, the British Journal of Medicine, the Lancet, all these prestigious journals are all based on discussing that which is a fantasy, because there's no disease and there's no cure. therefore no cure. You understand that medicine is based on the fact that every disease is separate, distinct, and therefore has a separate and distinct etiology or cause. And by having a separate and distinct etiology and cause, it therefore requires a separate and distinct cure. And you got to come to me because I studied all these things and I know these things. It's all, none of it is true. Now, there's another group. I want to try to give you a little tour here of some of the thinking. Homeopathy. There was a guy, one of the homeopaths, came up with the concept of homotoxicology. It's very similar, and I just want to briefly do it. So, again, he says diseases are caused by toxins, and homotoxin, homo means toxins produced within. Chemicals, microorganisms, byproducts, post-traumatic cellular debris, and byproducts of hidden metabolic processes. What is the organism? And this is a really good concept. What is the organism? The organism is a flowing system of energy. Circulating. This energy circulates throughout the matrix. The matrix is the intercellular space. Every cell is surrounded by a space. Blood vessels don't go directly into a cell. They go into an area that's called the extracellular space. Okay, the blood vessel goes in there, the vein drains it out, the nerves go in there, the autonomic nervous system, and it's this matrix, this extracellular space that has to have a pH of 7.4. It's this matrix that has to have a certain oxygen concentration, has to have a certain glucose load. So it's really this matrix that is the bath around which cells have their existence. Okay? This matrix is what is the meridians in Chinese medicine. Okay. What homotoxins are, according to this view of it, is that homotoxins are, they reduce the conductivity. Now remember, we talked about, the other day we were talking about electrolytes and sodium and potassium and all these things which are positively charged elements that allow the conduction of electrons, and that is what we call electricity. And we're reminded that we determine if our heart's working by doing an EKG, and we look at the electrical output of our heart, and the shape of those waveforms tells us a lot. Okay? Flat lines are usually to be avoided, and the same thing with brain waves, EEGs. EMGs. Okay, so the detection of whether or not life is present is done by measuring electrical output. Okay, and also the evaluation of the quality of that life form. Okay, so anyway, so the homotoxicologist had it pretty good there. Okay, I won't. Because I'm running out of time, I won't go into all this. It's very important. But at the center of the matrix is a little cell called the fibroblast. And the fibroblasts, I mentioned the other day, too, that we no longer consider the nucleus of the cell, where the DNA is, as being the brains of the cell. Rather, it's the sex organ of the cell. The brains are the membranes. Easy to remember. Membranes are in touch with the environment, the matrix. Okay? So, in the matrix is a little cell called the fibroblast, and what it does is it is sampling what's going on and producing the appropriate glycosaminoglycans and proteoglycans and all these special types of cells or cellular products that maintain the conductivity because they're all negatively charged. Okay, so fibroblasts are pretty important little things. As an example of what these proteoglycans are is like, for example, heparin, which lines blood vessels. Every time you get a cut, you get stabbed with a toothpick, and you get a cut. Not only are you starting to clot, but you've got all this heparin being produced to not clot. Okay, so in our body, it's always working to balance. If you get too many clots, you get a stroke, you get a kidney infarct.